name is Clara Towson, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
I am Francisca George, and I'm a friend of the show.
Perfect.
Hi, my name is Susan Leemans, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom. Yeah.
My name is Zainab Sammaz, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
Hey guys, my name is Sasha Vickery, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
Hi, my name is Lloyd Harris, and I'm a friend of the show.
Perfect.
Hi, my name is Jan Faria, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
Yes.
Take one. Well done.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Paulini, and I'm a friend of the show.
Wow, Jasmine, you got it in one time.
Ready? Play.
My name is John Silk, and that is Damien Kust, and us, alongside about 38 others, we are the show. Although you could say the show is really tennis, and we're just here to sort of lubricate the news that happens. And we're going to look forward to, and I will try not to use the word lubricate ever again on this show, the the year that is ahead, even though we've already had 29 days, and in fact, when it comes to tennis, probably more like 31 or 32 days to reflect on. For Iga Swiatek, expectations, thoughts, what is the sort of minimum expectation? How did she do at the United Cup compared to those and Australia, but also looking forward to the 3 other slams and kind of the rest of the year? And I've taken up almost 10 minutes just explaining that, Damien. And why is that 10-minute figure relevant?
Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't place a bet on it, but basically we were discussing backstage whether this is going to be more like 10 or 30. Obviously, if we actually have a wager or something, then, well, we are the people in charge. So,
yeah,
I mean,
well, actually, both of us could click end stream, and it might just be a fight. If I went for 10 minutes and you went 30, it might be like that, depending on our reflexes. Iga Swiatek, of course, her reflexes are in pretty good shape, as you would expect for a professional tennis player who's currently world number 2. As I say, we're going to talk about expectations. So let's look back, though, in terms of whether she met those during the Australian swing. Beginning with the United Cup, I would say that in terms of results and performances, it was probably just a little bit better than maybe the mean average in terms of she got 1 or 2 big wins en route to before losing in the final, if you like, along with Poland against the US and Coco Gauff. Those wins, of course, coming against Mukova and Rybakina. I guess they were the 2 sort of landmark wins, if they were such, wouldn't you say, Damien?
Yeah, I think definitely over the last few years that the United Cup, Swiatek has been kind of unplayable. The only matches she lost are the ones against Pegula and Gauff, of course. But yeah, maybe this was different because the standard of the competition was a little better than last year. So you have Muchova, top 10 player, sort of like in terms of her level, who's been troubling her in the matchup before. Also, of course, Rybakina, Gauff among the top 5 players in the world at least. And yeah, to get these 2 wins, plus also even the Bolter one when she just kind of had to fight for it, I think that was really impressive too. Losing to Coco, who had such an incredible tournament and was finally just finding something on that forehand side and kind of restarted the rivalry. We'll see if it lasts, but for now we can say she kind of restarted the rivalry against her. I think it was a perfectly fine appearance, especially considering that against Rybakina we saw kind of like a lot of the tactics that probably going forward will be the key for Iga to win on fasterish courts. Especially, of course, from, it was like the first few games, they weren't like that. But when Elena is serving for the first set, there's a really big tactical adjustment in this game. It stays on for the rest of the match. And it just kind of gave you a lot of confidence that, yeah, this is kind of, the progress is finally happening. Obviously, last year she took a pretty drastic coaching change that was supposed to give her that progress.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that change? Because I remember the change of ends for that game at 4-5. So she's staring down the barrel in terms of that first set. She's, obviously Elena's about to serve for it, and 8 times out of 10, I guess she does serve that out. But I saw her having a chat with Wim Fissette. I saw that there was a sort of renewed belief and determination as she went to the court and clenched her fist, and that was the turning point.
Yeah, I don't know what he told her, but definitely she just started extending the points better, using the speed,
Okay.
athleticism. She has the spin. The fact that in the first set, I think I said on Talking Tennis that like she was playing as if she needed to go pee, which is pretty funny now because Lerner Tien said that about the fourth set against Medvedev at the Australian Open. That he just
Who was
needed to
playing? Was
pee.
it Lerner or Daniel was playing like that?
Lerner was Lerner. I mean,
Okay.
Lerner said that he needed to pee, and that's why he
Okay.
lost the fourth set 6-1. Either way, I don't think Iga needed to pee, at least not at that point in time. However, yeah, I mean, she just starts playing so much more patiently. Even the set point in that tiebreak is just a great representation of that. She doesn't really need to out-hit players like Rybakina. It's very tough to do it. Plus, also like incorporating a lot of spin, width, to kind of just maybe make use of the fact that, again, Elena is not exactly the same athlete that Iga is. And generally in this matchup, if it looks like, I don't know, Stuttgart semi last year, where every single point adds in 2 or 3 shots, that's not really good news for Iga. I know she won a set there. I know it's an indoor clay court. It's a slicker surface. It's very different to what they were playing on here. But that's not really how it should look if Swiatek is supposed to be winning most of the matches. And also just probably another thing on the day was that like maybe Rybakina's serve wasn't that amazing, but it did allow her that sort of like gap, to fit in. That's basically that ability to get that break back. And I think that, yeah, going forward, she definitely just was playing the matchup completely different and just not pulling the trigger on every first shot after the serve or return. I mean, she just doesn't need to do it against Rybakina. In fact, you can argue that she probably shouldn't do it.
Yeah. So yeah, reason for optimism. And in fact, Elena, in a way, despite that loss, I think there was some positives for her taking that tournament. Bearing in mind she has hardly played any tennis for the last 6 months. But focusing, of course, on Iga, there was probably not in terms of Iga's level, perhaps, but perhaps the fact that now Coco is gradually turning that tide, if not in a Jannik Sinner, Daniel Medvedev way. At least now we're going into Coco against Iga, especially on a hard court, maybe not knowing who would win. Whereas for the previous sort of 3 years, I think we always had a good guess on how that would pan out, because Coco did end up beating Iga. So the optimism perhaps was tempered just a little bit by this result, and maybe the fact that now, rather than being a 2-horse race for Australia, it was a 3, and obviously if you included Rebecca, and ultimately Madison won the tournament, but Coco was probably joint first, joint second favorite, whereas most of the time you would always have Iga ahead of her in the pecking order.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of more of a Gauff, going up ascension story than Iga going downwards. But definitely in that final, in that final of the United Cup, which is, I guess, technically, not the final, but yeah, I mean, the match that was played on that final day, definitely, I think you could feel that this might be a very different rivalry from now on if Coco keeps hitting through the forehand like this, if she can like stand up to Iga's pace at all of that wing. It's always been the case that they have some similar weaknesses on that wing, but then again, the offensive firepower just wasn't close at all. And now it actually was. And even when Iga was hitting just like incredible shot after incredible shot, still very hard to hit through, but at the same time can respond to it, Gauff as well. Yeah, it looked like a real kind of like rebirth moment for that rivalry. And maybe finally it will become what we always kind of wanted it to be. But yeah, for now, I mean, obviously we have to kind of like see a little bit more. I still think that the WTA finals loss, that was like a very different story in terms of how they were playing there. Basically, this was the first match that we saw. And if Coco is going to like keep developing like this, sure. But of course, after the Australian Open, it's also kind of, well, we can't just sort of assume that it's going to be the case from now on. Paula Badosa showed there's still fragility there.
By the way, Nerlan, I think you're missing an adjective here from just before trouble. Don't you need to be saying gigantic trouble, Nerlan? I think that's more what you're looking for. Okay, so yeah, reasons for optimism by and large going into Australia. Is it fair to say it was quite difficult to judge Iga's level, bearing in mind she had a much more comfortable on paper draw this year than in previous years, at least until probably the Navarro match anyway? You could then throw in the Navarro match as being evidence of that there had been improvements because she won it so comfortably, albeit I think the score line was a little flattering for Iga because I think it was a pretty competitive match, albeit that Navarro took almost a set and a half before getting a break point.
I mean, it's the same really with Arena. I mean, to beat them, you need to just like hit them off the court. And that was also the case this Australian Open. Like the players that Sabalenka struggled with, Towson, Pavlyuchenkova, Keys, the players that Iga struggled with, which is only Keys really. But like, I'm not saying that Towson and Pavlyuchenkova also would have come close against her. We can't know that. But like there's a pattern there. When it was someone like Liz or Raducanu, who, you know, they have pretty aggressive games generally, but they just get so overwhelmed by the weight of shots she has. And for Arena, it's pretty much the same of both wings. I think the top five, well, let's say the best 4 players in the world right now. Well, Madison Keys, sorry, but I'm still going to include Rybakina, Gauff, Swiatek, and Sabalenka in that conversation. Like, they just both have such insane weapons that no one else really can stand up to that unless they try to just like blast them off the court. And yeah, of course, it was one of the most dominant campaigns that Swiatek has had at a slam up until the semifinals. I think, in fact, a record in terms of the least number of games won. But yeah, it's also pretty fair to say that players like Liz, you know, we know that they're not going to be troublesome simply. And that's kind of something that Iga definitely has, you know, going forward as an asset for her, right? I mean, when you're outside the top 50, maybe even top 20, you're just not beating her. You're just not even coming close. But yeah, I mean, by the time the draw was made, I think for everybody, like the minimum expectation, if we're coming back to that Nick jargon, was that Iga should reach the semis at least, so that we have some sort of progress, considering at a non-Roland Garros slam that last happened at the 2022 US Open.
Just a slight tangent here, Damien. There was just a couple of little things that, of course, got Twitter on fire and perhaps elsewhere regarding Iga and stuff, let's say. First of all, there's the double bounce. There was also a moment during that Madison Keys semi-final where I think Madison was waiting to serve and Iga was practicing some returns. Again, Twitter was ablaze with anger over this issue, as well as the double bounce in the direction of Iga. Do you have any strong opinion, either for or against Iga on either of those two issues?
I mean, when it comes to the returns, it looks horrible on camera. I think we've well established by now that Iga is just kind of very individualistic on the court and sometimes doesn't really notice the opponent. So like, I'm sure it's not like malicious in that sense, but I mean, if it's outside of the rules, just punish her. It was the same with the jumping jacks. You know, I always said that, like, yeah, it's hindrance. So just enforce the rule and then it ends. It literally ends, because if she doesn't want to lose points, lose her first serve, or get time violations, she literally has to end that. And if the umpire is just sitting there like this, that's not really her fault. Like that's the umpire's fault for not executing the rules. Double bounce, I definitely have a slightly less sort of like a slightly more lenient, let's say, opinion on it than some do. I think there definitely are cases where you're either, you know, but if you're not 100% sure, then you're not going to give the point to your opponent, really. I also don't blame Navarro for not stopping the point right away, because, I mean, she had a play on it. We're still getting used to the video review thing, and so are the players. It's still not natural for them to remember that something like this is in place. I mean, even on the screenshot, you can kind of see that Iga is not really looking at the ball, right? Of course, you can most of the time you can tell by how it goes, by what sort of spin is on it. I mean, yeah, whatever. I think, obviously, as I said, if you're not 100% sure, you're not going to be giving a point to your opponent. Still, yeah. I think the bigger issue was the umpire not seeing it, despite it being in front of her very eyes.
I think of the three that we also just highlight, that third one with the hindrance issue at the net, I think it's probably the hindrance one that I'm pretty black and white on, in that, yeah, she shouldn't do it. It is hindrance. And as you said, pretty much, I don't think she's done it since. And if she, I do think the hindrance one as well is a little bit spontaneous, which is maybe a little bit more difficult to control. But as you say, I think the more time she gets punished for it than not. Yeah, I think she just doesn't really know what, you know, she's just in her own bubble, and that's that. But anyway, let's move on and let's get back to the tennis and the performances and the results. She does end up losing, of course, to Madison Keys. in a particularly painful manner. I think if she never wins an Australian Open, this, depending on how dramatic the next loss or how close she gets to it, if she has 10 championship points in a final and doesn't end up taking the title, that will probably end up being the most painful loss for her. But for now, at least, this is the closest she's come to arguably winning the title, although there would have been a small matter of beating Sabalenka in the final. Do we therefore say pretty much par for the course regarding Australian Open? And you could throw in United Cup there, maybe just slightly ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, when the draw was made, I think the minimum expectation was the semis. But with the way that the tournament was going, Gauff is out, Rybakina is out. I think there was a point when you really could easily expect a final at least, and then you go for it against Sabalenka and basically see what happens. Whatever the result is there, it's fine. So from that standpoint, definitely a little disappointing. I think the fact that Keys still managed to win the entire event, it's good for the fans. I think the fans will be, it will be easier to stomach simply because the player, I don't know, Madison didn't go into the final and have another 2017 performance. However, 2017 US Open, I mean, the first final where she lost in an hour. However, for Iga, I don't think it's much of a consolation. I mean, still, she had a match point. She was serving for it. Who cares how they did in the final? Who cares if Keys beat Sabalenka? So I think this is more, of a consolation for the fans rather than for her itself. For now, I mean, it's fine. For now, it's just kind of enough to give her a pass for this Australian swing and just say, we'll see what happens later. It's also so early in the Fissette partnership too. So these sort of results definitely just kind of tell us, yeah, I mean, okay, this was the best hardcourt result at a slam since 2020 US Open. Some things have improved. There was that tweaked sort of service motion a little bit, and also the fact that she was, in some patches of her matches serving pretty well. Again, it's just pretty tough to sort of keep up with this when you're stuck in a very difficult encounter. And obviously the serve against Keys generally was quite horrible from, maybe not from start to finish, but second set especially. There were definitely moments when she was just super nervous in there. You have to remember about that. There's that break point earlier at 30-40 where she has a mid-court forehand. And it's not a super simple shot, but you just gotta have the feeling in at that sort of point, which is tough because you're so nervous. But again, it just didn't have that feeling of, let's say, her beating Sabalenka in Madrid last year, when there was literally no, there's no moment when she felt it. She just kept playing every single point like it was the previous one, like it was, I don't know, 2-all, 15-all in the first set. And she definitely didn't have that here. Maybe there's some added weight as well of expectations, considering that, I mean, she hasn't had that non-clay slam run in a while. Clearly, she really wants it. So there's not that much positive, I guess, to look at when it comes to the Keys matchup in the semis. Maybe other than the fact that, again, there was a lot of good point extending from Iga, which it's a similar matchup to all of these big flatter hitters. Obviously, Madison is one of the main examples too. So it's just enough to give it a pass. I think it's nothing that is really going to be okay, she's made some massive progress. Expect the Wimbledon title now, but it's enough to kind of just let us, keep us going for the rest of the season. And of course, the time of the year that is coming now, that's kind of where she usually shines.
Yes, indeed. We'll just have one more thing on sort of before we look ahead to the immediate and short to midterm future. I just want to have a quick word on Wim Fissette in terms of this. Obviously, this is more or less 3 months, I think, since they started working together. How can we reflect on that? Can we see some subtle improvements from Iga or subtle changes? And perhaps what can we look forward to coming the rest of the season with that partnership?
I mean, you can see they were working on the serve, on the forehand. It's, again, very tough to keep that up when it's still not natural to you and you kind of have to think about it when there's a pressure situation. So I think we just have to give them a bit more time. The performance against Rybakina from 4-5 down, I'm not going to say 3-5 down in the first set because I think that game Iga was still playing like she was previously. But then there's that changeover. Whatever Wim said there definitely worked. Whatever Wim said there was right. So I think we can, again, just kind of give him a pass for the time being. When he came on, it's pretty obvious that she felt that with Viktorovski, things were getting a bit stale in terms of her progress. And in terms of the results, outside of Roland Garros in slams, so I think it's obvious that this is the goal. Fissette also made it very clear from like his first interviews as the Swiatek coach. 2 months or whatever they've had, 3 months maybe tops. It's not really enough yet, but some early positive signs are probably there. There's gonna be a couple more non-clay court slams this year, and maybe after that patch, after the summer, we can kind of get into some bigger, thoughts and analysis on how it's going and whether the changes have had the desired effect.
Yeah, 2 to 3 months. I think you're right. It's certainly not enough, and there's probably a few players on tour that maybe should have a think about that on both the men's and the women's side, that sort of hire a coach and 3 or 4 weeks later seem to ditch them. Anyway, okay, let's look forward to the immediate future for Iga, which of course is this Middle Eastern part of the year in Doha and Dubai, I think it is. I often get some of these Middle Eastern tournaments muddled up. But it is right that she's got Doha and Dubai, isn't it? Or Qatar, and Dubai, right? Doha Open and Dubai Tennis Championships. Of course, last year she won Doha and lost in the semis of Dubai. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, last year was just like a very classic example of what Iga can do probably this year as well, because she literally won the slow court, she lost on the fast one, and then Indian Wells Miami was the same. Doha and Indian Wells are the two venues where like she's been really dominant in her career so far. Again, she'll be the main contender there. Of course, it will kind of depend on like whether her biggest rivals also reach these stages. Last year in Doha, Dubai, she only had to play Rybakina in the final in Qatar, and it was pretty tough. The opening set, obviously, she stole that, and after that, she recovers and wins the second pretty easily. And then I think Indian Wells, she basically avoided all of her toughest competition. Also Miami, but there she lost in like the 4th round. So yeah, it's also about whether these like other top players stand up at all, like whether they actually reach the rounds where she can play them. But it seems like in Doha and Indian Wells, she's just so tough to upset for anybody who's not Rybakina, Swiatek, Sabalenka, Gauff. And I mean, I don't really see how we can expect anything else there.
The problem for her and expectations and seeing about this Wim Fissette thing is it's quite difficult between now and the French Open to see much room for improvement, at least in terms of results compared to 2024, with the exception of just winning every tournament between now and then, because last year she won about 75% of those tournaments. Maybe there might be a tweak to her schedule. That is something that Wim touched on, I think, during this Australian swing, that maybe there'll be a slight change to the schedule. So she's got a little bit more energy and a little bit more, whatever the word is. Yeah, just energy for the second half of the season. I can only think that means Stuttgart. I know some people, some fans of hers at least, are upset that she's playing both of these two tournaments in the Middle East. Did she get sick at one of them last year or something? They might have highlighted that. But yeah,
2023 she got sick.
Okay.
She got sick in Dubai. But yeah, I mean, you can't really just not schedule both of them. What you can definitely do is if you win Doha, just don't go to Dubai. Like that's a strategy. But yeah, I don't think there's much room for like changes in the schedule here. You've got obviously all the rules.
For me, it's Stuttgart. It's Stuttgart that she could skip between now and the French.
Stuttgart is the one that could be gone and nothing happens. I mean, these conditions are not similar to, well, they are pretty similar to Madrid, I guess, but who cares, right? They're not similar to Rome or Roland Garros anyway. So yeah, I mean, Stuttgart is definitely the one that could go. I'm pretty sure she had a hefty deal there in terms of the appearance fee. I mean, you want Iga Swiatek playing at your event for sure. You can't
Madrid could be one to skip. I don't know.
But again, that depends on how you do, because you don't want to just like not schedule for one of these events. You don't want to have a situation where you're losing in the second round in Stuttgart, and then you don't have Madrid even in your plans, and then you only have Rome and Roland Garros. So you just have to like work your way through it depending on the results too. So yeah, I think the only potential room for like manipulation of the schedule there is going to be Stuttgart. I mean, there's absolutely no way she would play Charleston unless she loses this in like the first round in Miami in Indian Wells.
Yeah,
second round because she's a seed, but I mean first match, just for like pedantic listeners.
Yeah. But so it's pretty difficult to imagine too many things. I mean, basically, she did the Sunshine Double. I guess that would be the area. Miami, I guess, is maybe was the tournament when she went out earliest in amongst these four before the clay court season. for her to improve on. But yeah, there's not much room for improvement. So it might be not until after the French Open where we start going, oh, okay, this is where we really see if the Wim Fissette thing is really kicking in. In terms of, the first half of the year, really to keep on par, at least, just absolutely she has to, and she probably has to do this for most years in her career. She has to win the French Open, right?
I mean, yeah, it's very hard to actually kind of like keep it up because, as you said, she was just winning most of her events. It's not a given that this will happen. You just have one random loss in there somewhere. She had a match point against. She had to save a match point against Naomi Osaka in the second round at Roland Garros. So it's very easy to go from that level, which you mentioned, and like the fact that you would like her to stay on par there. It's not that easy to do it. It's even tougher to get ahead of it because basically you would have to just go on a 37 match win streak again, just like she did in 2022. So yeah, there's a lot of pressure coming up. Thankfully for her, these are again very good conditions for her. All of these events, more or less, maybe Stuttgart, Madrid, the faster clay courts. Yeah, there are some. Let's say the pool of opponents that can trouble her there simply gets a little bit more extended. But basically being seeded 1 or 2 for all of these events, of course, that also allows you to avoid many of the potential issues. The other top players have to like really just get through the draw themselves to meet you. So yeah, I mean, let's say winning like half of the tournaments that she plays from here until Roland Garros, it's kind of the expectation. It sounds brutal, it is, but it's kind of the expectation. And yeah, then after that, we would actually get the part of the season that matters, sort of Asia, of course, which she didn't play last year, the US Open swing, where she's not at her strongest outside of that 2022 US Open title, and grass, which is, well, for all intents and purposes, very often just one event for her. And she would like to play warm-ups, but sometimes if you win Madrid, Rome, and Roland Garros back-to-back like she did last year, how are you going to play the warm-up? Now, she loses early at Roland Garros, and she probably plays that grass court warm-up, so that will also kind of decide it. But yeah, maybe even, sort of like Wimbledon will be kind of the first event when we're going to see some actual changes, because it's clear that Doha, Indian Wells, clay, it's not really the events where these changes are needed. She's perfectly fine and knows how to beat players on a slow clay court.
Yeah, right, indeed. I will just say this, that if she doesn't win a tournament between now and Roland Garros and does go on to lift the French Open title, then it would quickly get forgotten, if you like. Of course, the ranking points would show something else, and you would see her 1 or 2 places lower down the rankings potentially. But I just remember seasons for Rafa, for example, Nadal, where he didn't win a tournament, maybe going into the French Open, and then wins the French Open, and all is good again. And I think to some extent that would be the same for Iga. But certainly, where the vultures will be circling a bit quicker than they would do if she had a sort of perfect run. So if, for example, she wins the French Open, it probably only gives her a few weeks of grace, if you like, before people start questioning whether she can start winning elsewhere. And of course, that begins with the grass court season, as you touched upon, after the French Open. And I guess we'd be looking what I would look for her there, a bit like I would do in Australia, is either matching or bettering her best performance there, which I think is the quarterfinals at Wimbledon. But also if you can get a real landmark win en route. So if she'd made the semis in Australia, but she'd beaten.
But you know what the problem is? You're not gonna get a landmark win on the way to the semis because you're not gonna run into these players. Like as a
Madison Keys,
you're not gonna get
Jessica Pegula, Paolini. I mean, okay, they're not quite landmark in the sort of Rebecca, depending on where she's.
She can't beat Sabalenka or Gauff on the way to the semis, right?
No,
that's kind
of. But I'm mentioning everyone else.
I understand, but like other than Rybakina on grass, maybe they're really not landmark wins if she would play them. So like, yeah, it's kind of impossible for her to get a landmark win early in the event. I don't remember what I was supposed to say, but I definitely had something that I wanted to add. The
furthest she's been before is the quarters, and I was suggesting,
maybe not lose to the same player, because like Cornet, Svitolina, Putintseva, there's just so much that was like pretty similar between these matches. Just at some point, that the timing is not great for her, and yeah, she just starts kind of like hitting, random errors and kind of doesn't really have that intensity, the focus anymore, especially the Putin-Seva and Cornet matches, where like she just goes off for a number of games simply because it's uncomfortable and I don't know, at some point it's too much. But also, of course, we've said it before, like after winning the entire clay season, it's not that easy to keep performing. At some point, the physical wear and mental wear and tear also kind of like catches up. But yeah, I mean, I guess it will all depend on how things go there. It would be good for her to have a Grand Slam final outside of Roland Garros this year. I know there's just two more chances, but maybe that would be like a really nice target to go at. And then whatever happens in that final, that's another part of the deal.
Yeah, indeed. A few new people I can see tuning in. Do make sure you hit the like button, but even more importantly, click subscribe. Yeah, so that would be Wimbledon, and anything beyond the quarters, I think, and especially if she wasn't to lose to the same player that you just highlighted, I think that would be a step. Well, she's not going to lose to Elise Cornet, I can guarantee you that.
Yeah.
So I guess Cornet will always have a winning record against her, at least on the grass. That's for sure. Well, then we go into this sort of hard court swing again in North America, I guess. I don't think... Oh, is Warsaw off the calendar still this year?
It is off the calendar. I mean, that was basically during the Olympics, it didn't make sense. They had the license for also 2025, but for financial reasons, they just decided not to do it. One thing she might play in Poland is the Billie Jean King Cup. We are hosting the group in April, and it's Poland, Ukraine, and Romania, I think. Whether she plays that or not, we'll see. But
in April on clay?
Well, we are going to be deciding that, I think.
Okay.
Well, it could be clay, could be indoor hard. Actually, when we last played the Billie Jean King Cup at home, it was indoor hard courts at that venue. So I think it will be indoor hard courts actually, because it was against Romania that Buzarnescu and Prisakariu wins, which obviously were just one game dropped. I think it's just going to be indoor hard actually. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, post Wimbledon, of course, we've got this hard court swing where there will be points to be gained. She played the Olympics, of course, last year, so therefore didn't play Washington, one of the build-up events towards the US Open. She didn't play Canada, right? Either, I guess. So she just went to Cincinnati in the US Open last year, if I'm right.
I mean, I don't think she's gonna really wanna play Washington, although she might. Again, it's just a case of okay, yeah, if I, sorry, flash score notification. Anyway, yeah, that was last year. Obviously, yeah, the calendar was very different. I don't think it's super important for her to play Washington. Mostly these two big 1000s, especially now that they're gonna be longer, extended to a 3-week swing between Canada and Cincinnati. They're gonna be taxing already. So I don't know if that really means a great deal of difference, but yeah, post Wimbledon, there's more of a break now. Yeah, it's gonna be a month between Wimbledon and Canada, so maybe that will allow her to get some better preparation in, and yeah, maybe play both and do better at both than she's done before.
And maybe even here we'll see a sort of extended element of the litmus test of her new coaching partnership with Wim, and we'll obviously look at the Wimbledon or the grass court season block if she does play, for example, Bad Homburg before, but obviously Wimbledon most importantly. But then also during this period of the season, where if she was to clean up from Canada all the way through to the US Open, if she won all those three, it would be if she won the French Open as well, would be the best year of her career. I would suggest even better than 2022 potentially. And yes, points to be gained, notes to look at to see if there has been a step forward. She hasn't even, if we just sort of reel in those expectations a little bit, even if she just has her best run at the US Open, let's say since 2022, she gets to the final there, but ends up losing in 3 tight sets to Sabalenka, for example, or even Coco, then again, we would see a step forward compared to where she was when she was losing to players such as Pegula last year or Ostapenko the year before.
Yeah, I think it's, as we kind of learned at the Australian Open, expectations change. We adjust our expectations as the events keep going. So we can't just say that a final would be an amazing achievement, because in that final she might play, I don't know, Jasmine Paolini, and then the plan becomes, no, I have to win it, right? So, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of maybe like without knowing anything about how these events will be going, like a final at either Wimbledon or US Open, that would be pretty cool. And yeah, if you lose to Coco or Arena there, obviously, yeah, that's not really a big deal. But just something that would tell you she's now ready to beat the Pegulas, the Svitolinas of the world in these tournaments, which for the past few years she hasn't been. Of course, her 2022 US Open run that featured a very tough win over Niemeyer.
Oh, I think Damien has frozen as he says the name Niemeyer. I'm sure he'll be back. I just want to draw your attention to, while we wait for Damien to return, I think it's Damien's internet, not mine. Let me know in the live chat if you can still hear me. We've got an article here written by Nick talking about this sort of minimum and sort of maximum expectations. I would agree with the sort of stretch goal of winning French Open and one other major. I think that would be a phenomenal year, whatever else happens on the tour. But probably if she does win the French Open and another major, hi, Ashley, I would imagine that there will be a few other tournaments throw in that she's won. And yeah, I think that's a great sort of maximum goal, if you like, for Iga. Where I think Nick and I would disagree is qualifying for the WTA finals, because I think if she did that, that means a sort of, top 8 finish in the world. And if she was 8, 7, 6, 5, or probably even 4 in the world, I think she would be exceptionally disappointed with that, as would be her fans. In fact, at this point, I'm going to put up Gil Gross's and my top 10 year-end 2025s for you to have a look at. And for example, I do have her slipping down the rankings. I think that would suggest a disappointing year for Iga, and probably one that doesn't even include winning the French Open. So yeah, I would suggest the minimum expectation should really be it's got to be just the French Open, Damien. I'm just having a look at Nick's article there. Oh, you were just about to say something about, you got frozen as you said Niemeyer, by the way.
Oh, okay. I was still talking a lot after that, but my phone for some reason decided to turn off my hotspot. No, I was just going to say that maybe get another win like this, 2022 US Open. She beats Niemeyer, and it's not like Australia when nothing improves for the next round, but she gets over that tough hurdle and then is able to keep going with the tournament. Maybe that's something also that she can look at US Open Wimbledon. That kind of goes back to what I said earlier about Putintseva and Cornet, when she was just going off for games at a time. Yeah, that article from Nick, I guess that's just the one thing that I didn't enjoy about it. I guess it's simply, it's not enough. Qualify for the WTA finals is not the minimum expectation for Swiatek. It's not the minimum expectation for Gauff. It's not the minimum expectation for Sabalenka. It's not the minimum expectation for Rybakina. I guess that's where I can stop. That's probably the top 4 players that kind of just have to aim higher. And for Swiatek, qualifying for the WTA finals and let's say not making a final of a major, no, it just doesn't work.
No, I would say in one sort of facet really is her minimum expectation, and that's win the French Open. If she won no other title this year, but she won the French Open, it would be an okay year, which of course for 99.9%.
Yeah, but it works for any slam then, right? Let's say she doesn't win the French, but wins one of the next ones. It's fine too.
I actually think it would be better even, Damien. I think if she didn't win the French Open, but she won Wimbledon, you'd probably put that slightly higher.
I agree, but in terms of minimum expectation, that's simply what I would put here. So win a slam. I don't care which color, if you may. I mean, it's just has to be a slam title in a year for a player like Swiatek to be satisfied with it. She's still not going to be fully satisfied with it because obviously, these guys are perfectionists and I don't think there's always going to be something to nitpick. But I mean, it would simply be very different from a perspective of how the season progresses, though, if she lost at the French and then there's more pressure on that Wimbledon or the US Open to be good. So maybe that, but I mean, just in general, one slam a year, that's kind of the minimum expectation. Of course, it's going to be tough to pull it off every single time. There's just 4 events. But if you're dominating the tour as much as she's been since early 2022, that's where we are. That's what sort of career resume we're talking about. And coming back to the point that she made previously, that if she loses a lot of matches in the clay warm-up swing but wins the French, that is important right now. But it's not in 5 years. It's not in 10 years.
No. Indeed. All right. I think we're just about there. So, I mean, just sort of wrapping it up in terms of, again, sort of minimum, I think she's got to be probably top 3 in the world is really a sort of minimum expectation. And obviously sort of the maximum that it can be and realistically can be is number 1. And somewhere in between those, and that's probably now where I would probably sort of tweak my prediction. I probably would have I've got a 5, as you can see there, but I think there's reasons for optimism from what we've seen already in the first sort of 4 or 5 weeks. And probably now you'd have to probably put her a little bit higher than 5. In fact, most people probably would have had her in the top 1 or 2 anyway. Anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
There's a comment from the Knight. So Fariga only wins versus Gauff and Sabalenka, not on clay, are significant. I mean, that's not really what we're trying to say, I guess. What we're trying to say is that these are the wins that would tell you, she's made progress.
Yeah. I see what the question is. I see why the question has arisen, and I see why I would say yes to that, Damien. That's because that's what, when we talk about expectations and exceeding them or steps forward and Fissette and all those other stuff that's sort of surrounding this whole show is, she beat Sabalenka in a Wimbledon final or a US Open final or in Cincinnati or Canada, for example. Then that's all part of the hopefully upward trajectory that she's seeking, right?
Yeah, and tournament wins are also obviously significant anyway. And when I was saying that if she beats, let's say if she faces Paolini in the US Open final, the only thing that would change is that she would expect to win it. Whereas against Sabalenka, she wouldn't necessarily expect to win it. But the fact that she won the tournament would still be the significance would be very similar. I guess I don't really have that much more to add. Was just gonna respond to that question, and hopefully we were clear enough so that people aren't gonna jump at us. There's a lot of passionate Iga fans on the internet. I'm sure there will be some comments like this, but I mean,
for sure.
Besides your number 5 prediction, I think we're pretty respectful.
Yes, indeed. So you can be reminded of that as it shoots across the bottom of the screen. Of course, do get in the comment section below whether you agree or disagree with anything that Damien and I have said. I can't guarantee that we'll necessarily respond to them, but maybe I will. Depends on how they are and the nature of them. But of course, everyone will have a slightly different opinion. And I understand the question from Deadly Knight, but I also understand that in the moment, of course, the expectations do change, because if you're suddenly, as you said, even lower than Paolini, let's say you're playing a player outside the top 15 in that US Open final or Wimbledon final for that matter, then suddenly you are a pretty heavy favorite. And even if you've gone further in Wimbledon than you have ever done before, if you end up losing the final in a flat manner, then suddenly it sort of changes the feeling surrounding that. All right, cool. On that note, I think we'll call it a day, Damien, all right?
Sure.
Cool. We've got the doubles review coming up in about half an hour. Nick will be hosting the boys from the Tennis Tribe, Will and Hanlon, for that. So that's to look forward to. In the meantime, you know the drill.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.